officer in the United States Air Force.
Hmm. Wow.
And when I was high school age, I was living in Germany. I lived in Germany at an American military housing area for about 4 years in the early 1960s. And during my school vacations, I would visit different places in Europe. I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity of being there. So on one of my school vacations, I went to Stockholm, and I was staying in a youth hostel there. And I met some European kids who had, I mean, say kids, I mean, they were like probably in their 20s, who had traveled overland to Europe and back, from Europe to India, overland and back. You could do that in those days. It's a little more difficult now.
Right.
But I was kind of fascinated with their accounts of their experiences in the Himalayas and Kashmir, meeting different yogis and saints and things like that. So I began looking into the text, the Vedic text of ancient India, the Upanishads, the Puranas, things like that. And in those works, I found accounts of human populations existing on Earth in very distant ages, going back in some cases millions of years.
Hmm.
So I began to wonder, well, is there any factual basis for that? Or is that just some invention, by whoever put these
Right.
works, ancient works of literature together? So I started looking into the history of archaeology. Of course, in the current textbooks, you don't see any evidence for extreme human antiquity. You only see the discoveries that go along with the now dominant paradigm that humans like us evolved fairly recently from more primitive ape-like ancestors. Now they've kind of pushed things back to about 300,000 years. But yeah, so I decided to look beyond the textbooks. And that may be an influence of growing up at that time among people who were involved in the various intelligence services. So I kind of learned at that time that there are things going on in the world that most people simply don't find out about
Right.
unless there's some leak or somebody talks about it. So I thought, let me look back into the original records, the original reports by archaeologists. Like just recently, the government here has released some JFK papers and
Right.
things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I thought, well, let me look at some of these original documents. And when I did that, I was pretty surprised to find there were lots of very respectable scientists reporting discoveries of human bones, human artifacts, human footprints, going much further back in time than the current dominant theories allow. Like I said, right now it's at around 300,000 years. So I put together those reports with a colleague, Richard Thompson, and that resulted in the book Forbidden Archaeology.
I had someone on about a year ago because I keep seeing every so often a discovery or possible discovery of a new human race, or not new human, but a human race from the past. When you see something like that, when you are doing the research that you do, does that still excite you, or does it not surprise you?
Well, it can be
Or I
both.
guess human species, put it
Yeah,
that way.
I mean, I can, uh, yeah, it, it's kind of interesting because at the time my book, Forbidden Archaeology, was first published, scientists had a very linear concept of human evolution.
Mm-hmm.
There was Homo habilis, who turned into Homo erectus,
Right.
turned into the Neanderthals, who turned into humans like us. It was very linear. But they started discovering uh, evidence for other human like, not exactly like us, but human like creatures coexisting with each other. They began to add, they found, well, it's not so much that the Neanderthals
Mm-hmm.
turned into modern humans, they coexisted with them for some time. And now they've added the Denisovans based on some discoveries that were made in Siberia,
Mm-hmm.
the Russian Federation, at a cave there. And they've also added creatures like uh, what they call the Hobbit from
Right.
Flores Island in Indonesia. Uh, it helps to have a catchy name
Right.
for
Right.
new species. Yeah, I mean, I think the official name is Homo floresiensis. If I say, hey, they discovered bones of Homo floresiensis, doesn't register, but I say they found the Hobbit in Indonesia.
Right. Right.
Becomes
Lord of the
like
Rings.
becomes like a whole thing. It's good marketing, good branding.
Well, in your research, I know, I'm sure a lot of stuff that you put out there is controversial to a lot of, scholars and scientists. But are there scientists or scholars that reach out to you and say, "Listen, I agree with you. I think you're on the right track. But if I said that out loud, it would either I get fired or get reprimanded." Have you heard that from people?
Actually, yes. Of course, I can't reveal their
Right.
names,
Right.
but there was a very prominent archaeologist in Europe who wrote to me exactly like that. I'm a member of the World Archaeological Congress, which is a big organization of archaeologists internationally. And we were taking part in some internet discussion group that the World Archaeological Congress runs. And he wrote to me on the side, I'm familiar with your work, and I I think you're making a great contribution to the discipline. And but it's like you said, they can't, if they come out and say that, then they're exposed. I've
Mm-hmm.
also had students of archaeology write to me, graduate students of archaeology,
Right.
right? One of them wrote to me, this is pretty amazing. It said, I was out on an excavation with my professor, and I just happened to mention to him while we were excavating, maybe humans have been around for a little longer than we think. And he said his professor told him, I've got a book you should read. And the professor gave the student his personal copy of Forbidden Archaeology. So when I was writing the book, I was thinking this should be like an underground classic, kind of the
Yeah.
sort of thing, somebody might read it, be interested in it, but not like advertise it. But if he finds out, oh, somebody is a little open to these, and pass it on to him. So I kind of like that idea. Uh, an archaeologist from a European country came up to me at a conference, and he said, in my country, the archaeology students are reading your books. and they're getting into fights with their professors about it. So I kind of like that aspect of things. Generally, like when people write to me or get in touch with me somehow, I kind of ask them how they first learned about my work because I'm kind of interested in
Yeah, of
the
course.
channels by which uh, controversial ideas circulate. Of course, now there's so many ways that ideas circulate, social media and so on. But uh, I, I find it a fascinating topic.
No, it is, and I know I do a lot of paranormal shows. That's what my show's about, from ghosts, UFOs, ancient civilizations, all that stuff. And 20, 30 years ago, a lot of the topics that we talked about were very taboo, and a lot of people did not even want to expose themselves as believing in this stuff without seeing like in society as crazy. Have you noticed more in the 21st century and 2025 that people are more open to your theories?
Oh, yes. And it's kind of interesting that you mentioned the paranormal and UFOs and things of that sort, because that's where this topic of forbidden archaeology leads.
Hmm,
Because you might say, well, okay, what difference does it really make if humans existed 10 million years ago
right.
or 300,000 years? What's the difference? The difference is that it means if this kind of evidence that I'm bringing to people's attention is accepted, then it calls into question our whole explanation of where we came from. In other words, we need new explanations for our human presence on this planet and in this cosmos generally. So uh, I think these new explanations are going to have to involve consciousness
Hmm,
and its very unusual powers, including remote viewing, psychokinesis,
right.
all the paranormal aspects of things. And, that's why I've written other books subsequent to Forbidden Archaeology that delve into those topics. Because basically, I think we're undergoing a fundamental renegotiation of our whole picture of the cosmos and our place in it.
Right.
And I think the paranormal researchers, the uh, alternative science researchers in general, the UFO or UAP investigators, they all have a role to play in this.
I totally agree. I feel, even we've talked about Bigfoot, and Bigfoot used to be just this ape-like creature that just eludes people, but now we're starting to think it's an interdimensional being, traveler, that is able to come in and out through portals or whatever way they can do it. So I love how we're evolving our thoughts and our theories when it comes to these subjects. So, and same with archaeology. I mean, I think it's very important. I'm a big family tree person, and I always say it's very important. Yeah, because my 10th great grandfather was so and so. Well, that may not mean much to you, but I think you can tell a lot about who you are and where you come from, and even your thoughts about things from your ancestors. So I think it's
Yes.
important to know where we come from. So, and, and that being said, is there a timeline that you are kind of have a uh, um, favoring? Is there like a archaeological study that you feel like more connected to versus others that I mean, you've
Um,
studied a lot. So is there one that you feel more connected to?
well, there's one that had substantial effect on the whole timeline, general timeline for human origins. And that was the Java Man discoveries that were made in 1892, I think it was, at a place called Trinil in Java. Now, the reason that's significant is the whole concept of human evolution, the way we understand it today, was started at the time that Charles Darwin
Hmm.
published his revolutionary work, Origin of Species. And he didn't directly say in that book anything about human beings evolving from apes and monkeys, but other scientists immediately drew that conclusion. So they started looking for what they call a missing link. That would be a being that was intermediate between the ancient apes that existed millions of years ago and modern humans who appear to have come in fairly recently.
Hmm.
But they didn't have a real timeline. So they were excavating and making discoveries throughout the 1860s, the 1870s, the 1880s, but they weren't finding a missing link. What they were finding was evidence that humans like us existed in the very distant past.
Hmm.
Finally, in 1892, when uh, Eugene Dubois, who was a Dutch researcher, found Java Man, Pithecanthropus erectus is the scientific name he gave to it. When he found those fossils, and they gradually, over the course of a couple of years, became accepted by the scientific community, they were able to fix a timeline because Java Man was found in formations about 800,000 years old.
Wow.
So if you've got the intermediate Java Man at 1892 at 800,000 years, then you've got a marker. That means
Wow.
anything human has to be after that, in more recent times.
Right.
Anything that was, then it became a problem. But what are we going to do with all this evidence that accumulated over the previous decades that showed human beings have been present for many millions of years?
Hmm. It,
It had to be cast into oblivion, set aside, dismissed on very flimsy grounds. Uh, and an example of that, which has always been one of my favorite cases, is the California gold mine discoveries that were reported by Dr. Whitney, J.D. Whitney, in 1880. They were rejected by some scientists who occupied very prominent positions at the Smithsonian Institution and other scientific institutions in the United States. They were rejected simply because they contradicted the Java Man discoveries. They Whitney was placing humans on the basis of the discoveries that were made in the gold mining region in California in times that went back millions of years. So that was that Java Man discovery, Pithecanthropus erectus, was really a key discovery. So when anything human was discovered after 800,000 years, it had to be interpreted in such a way that it fit within the dominant idea. And there are many examples of that right up to the present day, where scientists will find a footprint, say it's completely human in form, but they won't attribute it to a human being because maybe it's found in a layer of rock, say 700,000 years old,
Right.
like some footprints that were found in England a few years ago at a place called Hoppisburg. Uh, they found dozens of footprints, and they decided, well, we can't call them human. They are human. They're exactly like the footprints of living populations of anatomically modern humans. But they can't be human because humans didn't exist until much later. So they make proposals. Well, there must have been some kind of hominid existing at that time who had feet exactly like modern human feet. So you get that kind of thing going on. So
Was that what you called the teeth rattling hypothesis?
the
The teeth rattling hypothesis. In one of your books, you described it when the places of the anatomical modern humans on Earth millions of years ago, and
yeah, well, I called it forbidden archaeology because it's just not accepted. It's not considered.
right.
Evidence like that isn't really considered, proper. Something's got to be wrong with it.
Well,
But this is something that's been understood for a long time by historians of science and philosophers of science, like Thomas Kuhn, who kind of popularized the use of the word paradigm to describe the mindset of a group of scientists at a particular time where they believe they've got things basically figured out. There may be some things that are anomalies, but we can just set those aside, go on with our work, and gradually it'll all be figured out. But that doesn't always happen. Things don't get figured out,
right.
and the anomalies sometimes become so prevalent and so difficult to ignore and cause such problems that they're eventually compelled to change their theoretical concepts, change their paradigm. It's
Hmm.
called a paradigm shift.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a quote and from Dr. Michael Rothstein or Stein, it could be either way, suggests that murder victim is man itself, which is a very powerful metaphor. And in your view, what has modern humanity lost by accepting the Darwin model as scientific dogma?
Yeah, Michael Rothstein was a Danish author, and he published a review of forbidden archaeology in the biggest newspaper in Denmark. So it kind of caught people's attention. It was translated into English, and he kind of said a century or two ago it was the Darwinists who were uh, getting all the attention,
Mm-hmm.
and now they've become the establishment, and it's other people like the authors of this book, Forbidden Archaeology, who are, the troublemakers these days. So that was interesting. As to your question about what price do I think human society has
Paid. Yeah.
paid
Yeah.
on the basis of the prevalence now of the Darwinian theory of evolution, I'll have to say, uh, I think that Darwin had some good insights, he had this idea of common ancestry, that there's some kind of selection process going on. Something is kind of modifying itself and improving its adaptation to the world around it. And, I think he was right on the right track there, but he just, because he was a very strict physicalist or materialist person, and he didn't recognize that consciousness was something independent from the organism's body, its brain, its nervous system, that it was something completely different from ordinary matter. He couldn't really see what it was that was actually evolving. So I think what was really evolving is consciousness. Consciousness was evolving through these different bodily vehicles that had been provided for it. So he kind of had a good intuition, but because of his metaphysical commitments, to strict materialism, he kind of missed out. Actually, the co-founder of the theory of evolution, Alfred Russel Wallace,
Hmm.
who, I mean, when it first came out in the 19th century, the theory was called the Wallace-Darwin theory. Now it's just called Darwin's theory. What happened is that Wallace became interested in the paranormal, and he decided you can't explain consciousness by natural selection and a purely materialistic evolutionary concept. So he became involved in studies of the paranormal,
Hmm.
consciousness, and I think the effect of the dominance of the Darwinian theory of evolution has led to society becoming very materialistic. If you can give a person a sense of their identity, you don't have to do very much more than that, because with that sense of identity, a person will form appropriate values, goals, and objectives in life.
Hmm.
For example, if, as many scientists say today, we are just machines made of molecules
Right.
in competition with each other for survival, individually and collectively as nations, then we develop certain goals and certain values that lead to a certain kind of life. And so I think that has been one of the big effects on human society, that because we have values, goals, and objectives founded on our sense of identity, that we're purely material beings,
Hmm.
our goals and objectives in life become extremely materialistic. And we think that to produce and consume more and more material things is the purpose of existence. And that generates wealth, which flows
Right.
in a differential way into to benefit people who are controlling different financial, economic, political, military, and even religious institutions. Everything is kind of based on that. If we had a different sense of identity, instead of seeing ourselves as machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival, if we saw, I'm a being of pure consciousness, you're a being of pure consciousness, we're all beings of pure consciousness, then I think we would have a different civilization with a different set of values and a different set of institutions.
I love that answer, and I totally agree with you. And I'm hoping as we continue to go down this human experience, and we keep getting a higher consciousness of one another. So I appreciate that. I do have a question from the chat room. Brendan was asking this question. I hope you don't mind me asking, Michael. He says, do you suppose the paranormal plane has something to do with neutrino? I'm going to hope I say it right. Neutrinos?
Neutrinos?
Neurotrinos. Sorry. Neurotrinos.
Well, according to the way that I think and the way that I'm accustomed to think of these things, is we have to understand that a human being is composed of three things, or any organism, whether it's human or animal or plant. There's a gross physical body made of the ordinary material elements, the ones that you see in the periodic table, iron, calcium, phosphorus, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, all those things, which are composed of subatomic particles, quarks, all those different things.
Right.
That's part of what we are. But beyond that, I believe there is a subtle mental energy that can act in ways that appear to violate the ordinary laws of physics, whether we're talking about classical physics or even quantum mechanical physics. And that subtle material body is what is generally manifesting what we would call the paranormal phenomena, like psychokinesis, remote viewing, and things like that. Then beyond that, there's the actual conscious self who is perceiving the activities of the mind. Like I say, my mind is agitated today, or my mind is feeling very peaceful and calm. But who is the I, or who regards the mental phenomenon, including the paranormal ones, as mine? Just like I say, my body, my mind. So who is that? That is the conscious self, and that's who we really are. So a lot of what is called the paranormal phenomenon has to do with I believe, with the activity of the subtle mental body.
I love that answer, and I hope that helps answer your question, Brendan. We appreciate you participating. And speaking of consciousness, and I'm going to go into a little bit of your work. Integrates spirituality and physiological framework from Vedic traditions. And how does this worldview inform your interpretation of archaeological findings?
Well, it does it in many different ways. First of all, that's where from the Vedic text, that's where I got the idea of looking for evidence for extreme human antiquity. Without those ideas, I wouldn't have really had any reason to question what I'd always learned from my teachers in high school, university, and so on. I just wouldn't have had any reason to question it.
Right.
And another way that the Vedic ideas have influenced my thinking is that it appears the evidence for a human presence goes so far back in time that it leads to the idea that this cosmos has a purpose, and that purpose is best realized in the human bodily vehicle. Uh, it's like, say, we build a space station, send the parts of it into or Earth orbit,
Right.
and assemble it. We don't just hope that in the spaceship the gases will combine, the chemicals will combine somehow, form some first organism which will gradually develop into astronauts.
Mm-hmm.
We make the space station because we know we have astronauts ready to go up there and use it. So I think our cosmos is kind of like that. It's got a purpose. It hasn't just come about by chance for no reason. And the human form, the human bodily vehicle also appears to have a purpose. And that is realization of the true nature of the self as pure consciousness beyond the limitations imposed by the gross physical body and even the subtle mental body. So, and then another way that the Vedic texts have influenced my ideas about archaeology is the use of consciousness, paranormal powers in archaeology. And I have found very interesting cases of professional archaeologists who have used psychic methods,
Wow.
used psychics in their archaeological research. And I gave a paper on that at a meeting of the World Archaeological Congress that was held. It was actually held in Jordan on the Dead Sea, and a few years ago. And at the conference, I gave my talk, and one of the archaeologists came up to me and we were talking, and he said, "I've never heard that before." And I said, "Well, that's why I'm here, to tell you about something you don't already know." Because a lot of times that happens.
Right.
People just repeat again and again and again what they already know.
Have you had any, personally, maybe a psychic connection to one of your researches?
Well, people would, I give lectures, have given lectures at just dozens and dozens of universities all over the world, and done probably thousands of interviews. And, so sometimes people would tell me, you're speaking about the theory of evolution. Maybe you're a reincarnation of Charles Darwin. So I would kind of laugh about that. That's funny. But then after some time, I started to wonder, well, maybe that's why I have to give all these talks and write all these books and
Right.
do all these interviews. I got to make up for it.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, sometimes, you do get feelings like that, kind of like a deja vu type of.
Yeah. I've had those every once in a while. You just kind of go like, wait a minute, this seems so familiar, and I've not been here before, in this lifetime at least.
Yeah.
Well, as we wind down here, I do want to know, with all your research, and the amazing books you put together, is there a timeline that you feel is the most significant to us personally in the current time?
Well, my concept of time is cyclical. That comes from the Vedic cosmology. So there's, according to the Vedic cosmology, there's a cycle of ages. And even the ancient Greeks and Romans had this idea as well, that there was a golden age,
Right.
followed by a silver age, followed by a copper age or bronze age, followed by an iron age. And things deteriorate as the cycles go on. So I think we are at the present moment, according to the Vedic cosmological calendar, in what's called the Kali Yuga, which is the fourth age. And it is predicted to be a time of increasing environmental and social disturbance.
I think we can see
And
that now.
you kind of see there are tendencies like that. But even though, so to me, the really important time is the present, because that's all that we are really present in. You know, the future is coming, the past has been.
Mm-hmm.
Where we are now at the moment, I think that's always the most important time for us. And we're always confronted at each moment of our presence with choices,
Mm.
what to do or not to do. You know, for example, I had the choice to appear on this podcast.
Right.
All the listeners, they had their choice. They could have been doing something else
Mm-hmm.
right now. You could
Right.
doing something else. But we've we've all made a choice to enter into this space and try to say something or hear something or do something that is going to be beneficial for ourselves and hopefully for others as well. So I think we always have, I mean, there's a Vedic mantra, you know, that basically says, uh, Asato ma Jyotirgama, you know, go away from the darkness and towards the light. So at every moment of our ongoing existence, we have those choices to make. So I was to say, now is the time, go towards the light, away from the darkness.
Amen to that. And that's even many people that have experienced near-death experiences. That's what they do. They experience the light. So on our way out, there are many young researchers and truth seekers that want to kind of follow in your footsteps. And what advice would you give them when they start going down the path that you went down? What advice would you give the next generation?
Um, well, I think each generation has to work out its own path,
True.
but uh, you know, I can just give the example of myself, you know, working in the times that I was present and have been present and continue to be present in. Uh, if one is interested in these alternative ideas, one basic decision one has to make is, are are we going to act within the establishment institutions or outside of them? And I think both options are there. I've chosen to operate as an outsider. I have relationships with archaeologists in the institutions, the universities, the scientific institutions, and so on. But I also have relationships with the alternative researchers, the general public, and others as well. So that's a fundamental decision one has to make. If one's operating as an outsider, one can say pretty much anything one wants to,
Right.
but one has to realize one isn't going to necessarily have institutional support. One will have to find some way to
Mm-hmm.
support the kind of activity one wants to engage in. But you're more free to say and do what you want. The difference is you don't have the command the same respect
Right.
that somebody who's uh, the you know an archaeologist at a major university and has access to laboratories, genetic analysis equipment, huge data processing uh, facilities, and all of that. So, but then you're a little bit limited. Basically, you can try to incrementally push things in the right direction. So that's a basic decision one has to make. And then one has to decide who's the audience
Hmm.
that I'm trying to reach,
Right.
and what are the best means of communicating with that audience, and what is my message? What is it that I want to say? Like, I mean, I can tell myself in a sentence what I'm
Right.
trying to get across,
Right.
but one has to have some idea like that and be aware of the media that you want to use to reach your audience. So, uh, and and it's it's an endeavor. I happen to like all aspects of what I do. I like researching, I like writing, I like speaking, I like going on the media,
Mm-hmm.
I like all aspects of it.
And I think
But
that's very important for people to know. Don't do it just for notoriety. Do it because you love it, and it's a passion. And I think it shows in your work for sure.
yeah, then have to be a little bit persistent.
Right. That's for sure. So Michael, I know we can't talk about your book coming out, but can you give us a hint what it's about? Is it still about the hidden histories?
Well, yes, actually, it's a follow-up book to my classic Forbidden Archaeology, cases that came to my attention after the first book was published. So uh, I'm kind of really looking forward to having it out and available for sale. But kind of at the present moment, I mean, if people are interested in my work, uh, we're kind of offering on my website a set of 5 of my books for a special low price.
That's great.
So um, if any of the listeners are interested, they might want to take advantage of that.
Just
It's
go to
good
mcremo.com,
Yes,
mcremo.com, and you can.
that's correct.
Perfect. Well, you are the best. I'm going to call you a legend because that's what you are. And when that book comes out, please come back. I'd love to discuss it and go into even deeper knowledge of what you've learned.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really anticipating that myself.
Well, good. Well, thank you, Michael Cremo. And again, go to mcremo.com. That's MCREMO.com. And you can get a set of 5 books for a very nice price. It might be for a birthday, Christmas, or even just do your own research through Michael's work. So we hope you can pick it up. So thank you, Michael. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys. Again, every Friday, right here on Truth Be Told, the Club Paranormal Network. We are here every Friday. We have Robert Hensley doing Truth Be Told Going Wild on Mondays, and Truth Be Told Transformation with Bonnie Burkert on Wednesdays, all at 3 o'clock Pacific time. So, but until next time, thank you. Subscribe, leave a comment, share the shows, and take care of yourselves and each other. Take care. Bye.